Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2024 CLF Boston / Northeast Reuse Working Group. Today we have a presentation from Cambium Carbon talking about their carbon smart wood. I would reiterate, please introduce yourself in the chat if you can. We'll look to have the presentation. You can feel free to put any questions you have in the chat as well, but we'll hold the official Q&A session until afterwards. And then after both the presentation and Q&A, we'll get into a couple relevant topics, looking at next month's meeting, the Embodied Carbon Summit, and some LEED v5 relevant credits. But for right now, I'll hand it right over to Jeff with Cambium. Please, Jeff, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And again, appreciate everybody giving us this opportunity to talk to you and present. My name is Jeff Cohen. I'm our VP of sales. So I head up all of our demand partnerships and work with all the specification community as well as our different verticals to bring carbon smart wood to the masses. And I've been doing this for 3 years now. And prior to that, I actually spent 11 years in the Northeast in New England, working with architects and designers and developers and builders. I represented a bunch of different technology companies and lighting products as well. So I worked in LED lighting and controls and all that stuff. So spent 11 years doing that. So very familiar with the area and the built environment and architects and working on technology and how we can make the world a little bit of a better place through buildings. Now, Cambium's on a mission to build regenerative supply chains. Our focus is really on how we can localize our focus on waste streams and on materials in general. And doing this through wood is really our first goal here. Let me see if I can, there we go. Our focus, hold on, sorry, clipped too far here. Our focus is really on thinking about where our wood comes from. And it's one of these interesting things when we take a moment to actually think about where wood comes from. And I know that's a funny thing because everybody usually goes, well, trees, obviously, wood comes from trees. And that is very true. But which trees, where, and how do they get into this country? And how do we import wood? Where does our wood come from that comes from this country, that comes from North America? And when you really stop and think about it, we've tried over the last few decades to come up with different things like certifications and some nuance to sustainable forestry. But at the end of the day, all we're getting is a stamp, or we're getting a high five or some good vibes from our supplier on where that material comes from. It's truly not something that gives us the same transparency that we're asking for in other parts of our world when it comes to fabrics, when it comes to clothing, when it comes to our food. You know, we've seen a huge shift in the way that stuff needs to come to market. And yet with lumber, we're still dealing with the few 100-year-old industry that hasn't shifted and hasn't changed all too much. We certainly have tried to push some things. And when it comes to importing wood, certainly I know over the last few decades, we've really focused on, back in the 90s, bringing in a lot of exotic materials that hold up really well in the outdoor environment. And only more recently have we considered what that actually takes and what the negative impact on the rainforest and importing that material and the conflict that actually comes from that. We're starting to shine a light on that, but there's really not a great option. There's really not great alternatives in this space. And so that's really where we're coming from, is thinking about how we can think about wood differently. Thinking about how we can think about importing wood differently, thinking about how we track these things differently, and that's really where Cambium and Carbon Smart Wood come from. And if you guys have any questions during this presentation, it's really hard for me to see any of the hands up or any of that. So please just interrupt and just throw a question out there, but I'll make time at the end for questions as well. So just make this pretty easy. I don't want to just talk at you the whole time. So if you do have questions, please let me know. To answer this problem, we really had to think about the wood that we throw away every day. And that's really where Carbon Smart Wood was born. We thought about the trees that are coming down. And if any of us drive throughout New England, I know it's no stranger in Connecticut. You drive on the highway, you see a lot of the work that they're doing constantly. and trees coming down, trees coming down. You see development going in, a big manufacturing facility, an Amazon facility that's being built somewhere, and you see countless number of trees that come down. Lots of projects that we've all worked on, trees come down, and the incentive there is backwards. It's about how do we get the material off the site as quick as possible? How do we chip it up into small parts and move it off of that site? And when you think about the number of trees that actually come down, it's quite staggering. It's nearly 40 million trees every single year come down just in US cities alone. And nearly 90% of that material gets chipped, burnt, or put into a landfill. In fact, we only actually save and recycle and reuse about 3% of the wood that comes off of our building structures or on our plots that are destined to be new buildings. And when you think about wood recycling being under 5% across the board, where things like steel get recycled 98% of the time, 97% of the time, it's really quite crazy that we haven't solved this problem yet. And so for us, focusing on those fallen trees all across the country, and not just our US cities, but also on the rural environment, farmland, suburban environments, when you start adding all of that material up, you're talking about 40 to 50 billion dollars in usable wood that can be stored into high value objects. And even at the most conservative level, if we were to save 40% of that material, we're talking about a huge impact, a potential gigaton solution at a global scale for the climate and for the environment. So what is carbon smart wood? Let's just start with a simple definition of what the brand is. And the reason we have a brand to begin with is because really the words you use currently for this material, salvaged wood, reclaimed, urban wood, they definitely have a negative connotation when you're talking with an end user, even an architect, a designer, a homeowner, about we're going to get barn wood, we're going to get bug riddled wood, we're going to get something that's been sitting out for a couple hundred years. And I think that negative aesthetic definitely, that negative connotation toward the aesthetic definitely stops people from thinking about utilizing or specifying the material. Plus, by putting the term carbon smart in the forefront of the material itself, you really tell the consumer, you tell people that this is a climate forward decision you're making. We are putting the climate part of this right in front and center. And then the last thing is, there's really not a brand in lumber. I mean, for you ask some guys that have worked in it, GCs, things like that, builders, contractors, even some architects, they'll come up with a couple brands every once in a while, but there's truly not a brand that signifies sustainability in the wood space. And that's really what Carbon Smart Wood is going to do. And currently, our definition is that it is salvaged, never harvested. 100% of Carbon Smart Wood comes from fallen trees that come down for reasons that we usually say the 4 Ds: disease, decay, disaster, and development. If a tree comes down for one of those reasons around the country, it ends up in our supply chain, and then it gets turned into Carbon Smart Wood. Another definition is that it's tracked on a chain of custody software. So every stick of wood, every log, every wood product gets tracked on software where we know down to the stump where that material came from, who touched it, how far it traveled, what process it went to become, a product on the other end, and then a percentage of everything that we do reinvest into local community operations and tree planting. So everything that we move, every piece of Carbon Smart Wood that ends up on a project, ends up on your project, actually reinvest back in that local community through either tree planting, investing into getting certification. So in Baltimore, we said, what can we do for a tree planting? They said, actually, we need to send a couple of our new employees through arborist certifications. Great. We sponsored that. We paid for that. So finding ways that we can give back to those local communities in which we're salvaging that material, so important to the story of Carbon Smart Wood. And the data really does speak for itself. And when you talk about comparing, wood products to recycled, even wood plastic composite decking, when you think about virgin plastic composite decking, when you think about MDF, when you think about even some of the other products that are, brands like Kebony and Akoya that tout a lot of sustainability value, these are all products that have to travel around the world on a boat a bunch of times before they even make it back here. And when we talk about Carbon Smart Wood, It's locally salvaged material, not harvest, that we actually can talk about a carbon negative material that gets started right in our own backyard. And the idea here is down the road, the end of the rainbow, you're doing a project in Boston, that material gets salvaged from the site or from the local community and then goes back into those projects. So keeping it as hyper local as possible is the end goal of Carbon Smart Wood. And this truly is the most sustainable wood option that we have on the market today. It all is local, responsible, without the hint of greenwashing. And whenever you're going to launch something like this, when we talk about salvaging logs, we talk about salvaging material at scale, there's always going to be some hesitation in this. And so that's why the technology side of it and us investing in building our own software to track this chain of custody and creating that as an open source software, it's so important to validating the claims that we're actually making on this material. And I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to what's been going on in the EU right now, but they are starting to mandate that everything be tracked and traced down to the stump in the EU later this year. And the EU is on board with it, but of course, the United States has a whole bunch of sawmills and wood products companies that petitioned and said, "Hey, can we delay this because they're not up to speed on this?" They were caught sleeping on the ability to be able to track their own material, and so we're way behind. Except we have that solution, and we're doing it first with salvage material, and hopefully we can add our software and the chain of custody tracking and help the rest of the industry really move along and create that transparency that's so needed. And this is the part that I think is really exciting for architects, designers, everybody in the built environment. And we're using this as an example for conference room tables right now, just because it's a nice, easy example. But every piece of lumber and product can have a traceable carbon impact. So everything that we do, we provide the carbon data on. So you will have, whether it's a product, whether it's 500 square feet of decking or 10,000 linear feet of siding for a commercial building, we will have the carbon stored, the CO2e stored in that product. We will know how many trees get planted and the lifetime impact of that product being installed, because we know what would have been used instead. We know how far that would travel, and we know the impact that that'll have taken from either a virgin forest or harvested or plastics or composites or whatever it happens to be. So being able to create that sort of traceability and impact story with every project is the goal of Carbon Smart Wood. And here's just an example of using 1,000 square feet of Carbon Smart Wood as an option. We're talking about being able to store 5,200 pounds of CO2e in the wood diverted from a waste stream. We're able to avoid 575 pounds of CO2e and planting 18 trees in urban rural communities. And so that's a lifetime impact of 15 metric tons. And when you think about something like this has real impact. This is the equivalent of taking
Uh-oh, it's frozen for me too.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just me. We'll wait a sec, see if Jeff can join back up.
Can I put in a plug for the Build Reuse webinar coming up next week about Lumber Stash, a hyperlocal wood harvesting opportunity? Oh, that's it. That's my plug. I'll throw the link in chat.
Yeah, put something in the chat for us. While we wait,
Yeah.
I joined late. Does anyone want to give a recap? What do you, I'm half kidding.
Great. Apologies, guys. I'm so sorry about that. So this is the equivalent tracking of 1,000 square feet of Carbon Smart Wood, which is essentially a residential deck, and talking about the impact here. And this is the equivalent, not going through all the CO2e numbers here, but it's the lifetime equivalent of taking 18 cars off the road for one deck. And when you talk about for a year, and when you talk about the impact that it can have and the ripple effect that can have for projects, not just in our region, but throughout the country, it really truly can have a massive impact on the climate. And so what do these products look like? A lot of times when we talk about sustainability or people talk about sacrificing for the planet, usually there's a trade-off in some instance. It's like, oh, I have to pay more money, or I have to sacrifice on quality to be able to do that. Well, that's really not the case when it comes to carbon smart wood. You can see from the photos here, the products are absolutely beautiful. And we use the lumber currently in a few different verticals, but these are the standard ones that we work with people in the built environment, architects, designers such as yourself. So decking, fencing, furniture, mass timber, which I know is sort of growing in popularity a lot for the structural side in the near future. And I know we don't have a mass timber facility yet in New England. Fingers crossed that that's going to change in the next 3 to 5 years. There's some reasons for that, but we also do siding, flooring, millwork, and countertops. So there's a variety, and obviously, if there's wood in it, carbon smart wood can be a part of it. And these projects are all things that we're really proud of, and they're things that we can certainly talk about even in New England beyond the options that I've showed here. So there's no sacrifice for quality. There's no sacrifice for aesthetics. You're getting fresh cut material that just happened to come down in areas that nobody's been paying attention to harvest that material for us to use and salvage for projects. And here's a great example of a story that I just love. This is so near and dear to my heart. This is a program we have with Room and Board, which is a residential furniture retailer, e-com retailer of furniture. Well, we had this problem where English walnut, and so this is a beautiful wood that has this incredible light and dark sapwood to heartwood ratio, also has grafting that happens. This is the material that you see from trees that actually produce the walnut that we eat in the grocery store. So farmers plant these trees, they grow for about 35 to 45 years. And then at that time, they stop dropping walnuts at the same rate. And so the farmers have calculated that if they just clear cut the whole forest, burn the pile of trees, replant, it's better than continuing to work the land with the walnuts at a tree that's longer than 45 years of life. So that's a really sad story because they're just burning this beautiful wood. But it comes with limitations because you got a tree that only grows for 40 years. You can't get an 8-foot board out of it. Therefore, the lumber industry sees that as trash. We're limited to 5-6 foot max. And this is the first time that I really saw the change happening in our world and our environment. And Room and Board tried first using the material in an existing design and then finally said, it doesn't make sense. Let's design something specifically around this material that doesn't have a home. And that turned into this graft collection, which has been a really successful program that we've been running for almost a year now. And so thinking about it like that, a company at that scale working around the material is really the messaging there that I think is so important. And here are the materials that we have. We have both an indoor and outdoor collection is how we sort of frame it up for folks. And this is a sampling of a lot of the carbon smart wood materials. One of the ways that we take things that wouldn't last outdoors at all and turn them into outdoor material is by thermally modifying them. And thermal modification, I'll talk about that in a second, really truly allows us to take something that wouldn't last 9 months outside and turn it into a 25, 30-year material with no finish needed. And it'll gray out just like a regular wood will outdoors. And so we use thermal modification both to take a standard material that ends up in our supply chain frequently and turn it into an outdoor material, but also we take something like soft maple, which is one of the most common woods that you see in cities around the country. And we turn it into something that you see there called walnut. So we take soft maple, we thermally modify it, and we turn it into something that looks very similar to a black walnut and machines very soft. And so we're taking something that aesthetically doesn't really look the same from tree to tree, modifying it so that it has this beautiful look across all the boards and turning into something that has a higher value without having us cut down beautiful black walnut trees just because they have incredible value to them currently. And so trying to innovate and use the materials that we find in our supply chain You know, the most common materials east of the Mississippi that we run into, the most common feedstock, red oak, poplar, London plane sycamore, and soft maple. And those are the things that are pretty much in every city. It's the trees that have been planted by landscapers and city planners for a long time. And they really don't have a lot of high values. So by adding the extra layer of thermal modification, we can create a higher value product out of that. And thermal modifications is great. If you guys have not heard of this yet, it was founded 40 years ago, and I mean, they've been burning wood forever to use it outdoors, but really the process of thermal modification in the kiln, the modern day kilns that we have, really started in Eastern Europe about 40 years ago. It's heat and steam at a high temperature that is no chemicals involved. You cook the wood basically at a very high temperature, something like 150 to 200 degrees Celsius over a period of 2 or 3 days. And what comes out the other end is a hydrophobic board that has all the sugars cooked out of it. So there's nothing that termites or bugs or anything want to grab onto. It has no, ability to decay. It has no is fungal resistant. It really truly becomes this gorgeous outdoor material that we can use. And it's all using things like red oak and southern yellow pine and lower grade woods that we now turn into a gorgeous outdoor product. And obviously, if there's anything that you guys want to do with Carbon Smart Wood, this is a quick overview of a brand new material that's starting to disrupt the space, and something that is really truly, I think, a game changer for how we can look at sourcing material now that we can actually track it, trace it, and use 100% salvage material at scale. We are working with companies, big and small, all across the country, that really care about where they source material, and they really care about their carbon footprint. And they've made, big corporations have made huge carbon neutrality or zero goals that they have set, and they're finding all sorts of different ways to get involved with us. And so if you guys have a project, or you would like samples, or you want us to do a more specific, office focused visit where we can do a deeper dive into some of what we do and some of the products, and go a layer deeper on all this, happy to do that anytime. I would also say that even though, our company's name is Cambium, the website to really go to from a specification standpoint is carbonsmartwood.com. That's really where you'll see a lot of the different samples, a lot of different project photos, businesses that we've worked with, case studies. It's also where you can request our sample boxes and really learn a lot more about the product as well. So again, I just really thank you guys, and I'll open it up. I'll stop sharing right now, and I'll open it up for questions, comments, anything you guys want to go a little bit deeper on. My email address is jeff@cambiumcarbon.com. And even though we go by Cambium now, we originally were Cambium Carbon. So the email address is still cambiumcarbon.com. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. So I'll open up to questions if anyone has anything. The one coming from construction, so the availability, say right now I wanted to work with my mill worker and kind of use a better wood product. Is there any availability or lead time concerns if we really wanted to use the Carbon Smart Wood?
Not specifically. Really our goal is to keep inventory just like any other product everywhere throughout the country. Now there are some, depending on the specific thickness, width, length, species, combination, there may be a specific lead time, but most of our products are 6 to 8 weeks. If we have things in inventory, it's even quicker than that. There's a few species like white oak that takes a little bit longer to get to market. So again, just depending on the specific spec, there's a little variability in that. But for the most part, we keep inventory all across the country.
Just looking at the chat, Luna had asked, how is the number of trees planted decided? I think you had a slide in your slide deck that claimed a certain number of trees either offset or planted.
Yeah, so we work, the way to do this is really working with the local tree planting authority in that city. And that's really our focus, because there's two different ways to plant trees. There's the high volume, we work with Arbor Day Foundation, and one of our partners work with One Tree Planted. There's lots of ways to plant lots of trees at once. However, there is a huge need for us to plant trees in our cities, and specifically in poorer communities. If you look at the tree equity data in our cities, it's astounding. It's just really heartbreaking, where the poorest neighborhoods have next to zero tree canopy coverage, and the wealthy neighborhoods have 40-50% canopy coverage. And that could be the difference of 15 degrees on a hot summer day. So part of our mission is to work with the local tree planting authority. So each city has its own, that really knows the neighborhood, that really has planting projects. And those trees aren't inexpensive. Like, you can spend $1 for one tree planted and plant a tree somewhere, or you can spend $150 and tear up some concrete and plant a tree that actually is going to be maintained and watered for 3 years. So that's the balance that we always have to walk into with this. And I hate to tell you that there's one size fits all for this, but we're trying to do both of those things, both get the volume of trees planted and really make an impact in the cities that we work.
Brandy, I saw you had a couple of questions.
Wait, sorry, can I just follow up on that?
Yeah, sorry. Go on.
Yes. So just to clarify, some of the revenue or money generated from the sales of the salvaged wood goes into planting trees.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. I see. And one more question: how does the tracking work? Is there like a QR code or some technology involved?
Oh yeah. There's loads of technology involved. So there's a QR code that's on the end of the product side. So if there was a table or a pack of lumber or a pack of decking that needed traceability, and they wanted the QR code on the material or on the paperwork that came with it, that gets spit out on the secondary processing or on the end of the chain. In the beginning, what happens is we're really marrying physical asset tagging with digital asset tagging. And so it really goes from a barcode standpoint, but we can read either barcode or QR code. And so a log will get tagged with a physical asset tag. It'll get scanned in the field because we have an iOS Android app that doesn't need the internet attached to it. So that if you're out in the middle of nowhere trying to scan these things into a system, you can do that. And then we've really solved the hardest part, which is a mill plan, where you take 17 logs and then those 17 logs kind of funnel into 6 different packs of lumber, and being able to track that chain of custody all through the software. That really took the hardest, but we've solved all that, and it's all done through the metadata tagging that happens usually with the photography that coincides with the single asset tagging. Again, we can get really technical. I got a whole technical team that can talk about that, but yes, it's a combination of both those things, and we can actually engrave some of these things. We've had like Guinness Brewing in Baltimore wanted us to actually engrave the QR code on the table, so that somebody just having a drink on a Saturday at the brewery, be like, what the heck is this? Scan it, get the whole story of the local trees, how they were felled, how they came to be, how they were salvaged and built, and all those great things.
Very cool. Thank you.
Very cool. Randy, I saw you had a couple questions. If you want to kind of combine them and ask them.
Yeah, I've done some milling, and I guess my question, because you probably have this down to a better science, and I'm assuming you're actually only recovering maybe 50% of, just say, a stump, a log, whatever the lumber is itself. And the question is, what are you doing with the call it the waste, with the chips? Is that emulsified more and made into another product, or is that wood chips?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because there's waste at every stage in the process. So us getting a log, let's say log shows up to sawmill, there's waste before we even see the product, right? There's the crown of the tree, and there's branches and all that other stuff that doesn't get to us. But let's say that we've got the log that comes to us. There's a percentage of that log during the milling process, the outer shell, the bark, some of the issues that you're going to run into just in milling in general, that's waste at the sawmill. Then there's going to be waste actually from the drying process of both air drying and kiln drying. There's going to be some waste there. And then depending on if we're going to mill that product into a deck board or a table, different waste that happens on the secondary processing. So it's a great question, because there's waste that happens at each stage, and there's not a one size fits all answer, because at each stage our solution is different. And so we are really looking into biochar as a huge solution for this, both from a carbon sequestration standpoint, and potentially data's still out there. Science still hasn't really solved this issue, but as a way to actually add some fortification to farmland for both water retention. And so this is a process where we could actually do a lot of good. There's a lot of carbon credits, which is a whole nother thing that I'm not super happy about the markets that exist. But of all the carbon credits that have been issued, biochar makes up a majority of the projects that actually happen. So there's some good science and data there. We are really far down the path of using that as a global solution for a lot of the stuff that happens at the sawmill. Now, when you have dried material in our shop, we have a couple different outlets for that. One is we're giving it away to local trade schools. We also give sawdust away to the farmers and the breweries locally at each location. So there's a lot of different ways that you can like give back to the community. Sometimes we just put firewood bundles out in front of our facility too, and let people that need that to heat their home come by and just pick those things up. And 100% of the time they go. Now that's not scalable in a way that we could say, oh, if this is in 100 facilities, but it's certainly part of us trying to give back to the communities we work in.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And then Melissa had asked in the chat if you work nationwide. I think the answer is yes, but I'll give that to you.
Yeah, we do work nationwide. I would say we're mostly built out where the trees are, and I know that sounds like the most obvious thing, but that really truly is the case. And so there's some parts of the country that just don't have the right type of trees to be able to do this. So where we're built out, pretty much east of the Mississippi, Midwest, East Coast. The South gets a little funky, but we still have some good operations there. And then Colorado, and then the entire Pacific Northwest down to LA, is another area that we're really built out well. And so we have 150 different folks that use our software today, that are milling material, that are part of our ecosystem, that are tracking and tracing all of that material currently, and they're scattered throughout the country.
So St. Paul, Minnesota is east of the Mississippi. Minneapolis is not. Dishes crashing in sync. We just hired a wood waste specialist to help us deal with the excess wood waste that we have in Minnesota. And my first thought is the ash trees that are coming down from the emerald ash borer. And we have funding available. We will have funding available later this summer to deal with wood waste. And this is not my forte, even though this person's in my unit. They just got hired like a month ago. So I have enough to do with my own day job, sustainability in the built environment. So I can't necessarily focus on this, but I'm just wondering, I'll be connecting you with that person, but I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity for better and higher use of downed wood, unwanted wood. Well, it's not all down yet. We haven't cut it all down. We don't have the crews to do that, but it's happening. So anyway,
we're very tapped in and very aware of all that. We actually had a consulting project with the Twin Cities doing some analysis on emerald ash borer, and there's 1 million trees that are going to come down in the next 10 years. And so we're very tied in there, and we can share some stuff offline about that. But no, Minnesota is a great place for us to work. It's obviously where Room and Board is headquartered, and it's where our thermal modification partner is headquartered as well.
I'll admit that's what probably got me to listen a little bit more carefully, because we have Wood from the Hood, who also takes downed urban trees and sells to Room and Board. And so it's like, okay, this is a big deal. I'm fully listening. This is important stuff. So, okay, I'll connect you to our wood waste person, and I'll just let the two of you take it from there, and you'll both learn from one another. So thank you. And thank you, CLF Boston, for letting me crash every single time. I spoke once, so they're stuck with me now.
No, totally appreciate that.
I had a question about the thermally modified wood and how carbon intensive that process is.
Yes. So this is still something that's running on a traditional boiler equipment, right? And so one of the things that we have both got outfitted for and have started to really focus on is how do we use a lot of our existing feedstock as fuel for that. And so these kilns, both even our standard kilns, so the kilns that require to take the last amount of moisture out of the air dried wood, those still run on typical Baltimore electricity at our headquarters, for example. And that is something that we are actively trying to solve for, because we could use the feedstock, we could use our wood to be able to power those machines and make them completely sustainable. When you start talking about the thermal modification, because of the temperature that has to get to, there is some variability in like what you can put into that. And so that's been the one that's been dragging, I would say, the furthest behind. However, the facilities that we want to work with are starting to outfit with regenerative energy too, where they're putting solar on the rooftop. They're doing some different things like that. I would say that it adds a little bit of obviously energy that goes into the product, but it's not a huge shift in the carbon story that we tell, but we make sure that gets factored into the carbon data that we supply for those projects that use thermal. I will tell you
So
right
it's
now,
not like negating all the benefits by, okay.
no, it's not and honestly, when you think about the other options, right? It's like, okay, what are we going to use instead? We're going to use chemical-ridden, pressure-treated material. We're going to use material that came from Europe or New Zealand, traveled around the world a bunch of times, or a bunch of plastics. Like everything else, logically, just is like, okay, well, this doesn't even hold up comparatively. So there's a huge benefit in the outdoor environment, which is why we focused on that, to be honest with you. Is like 75% of what we put for the outdoor environment, outdoor furniture, decking, siding, cladding, all of it is non-sustainable, highly non-sustainable materials, exotics, right? Those are all things that we're trying to deal with. So yes, it doesn't negate, and it still ends up being head and shoulders better than anything else you could potentially put outdoors.
Thanks for addressing that.
Yeah, of course. And we have a whole team too, going to both Melissa and Catherine, your comments too. I have a whole separate team that's just our consulting team that does all of our impact work, works with cities, does our consulting, produces our carbon data. We have a whole team that does that. So if there's ever a moment where something needs to go a layer deeper on a project, or you need somebody to speak more to that, I have a whole group of folks that can do that for us.
Awesome.
Any final questions from the group?
Yeah, I got a couple quick ones. Are you guys using vacuum kilns, or just standard kilns to do the charring?
Yeah, so vacuum kilns, we're a huge fan of vacuum kilns. We use a standard DH kilns too, just to do some like pre-drying of material. But really, we finish everything on vacuum kilns, and we actually have plate drying vacuum kilns as well. So that when we have 12-foot 1-inch material for decking siding boards, it just keeps the stability while you're getting that last bit of water out. So huge fans of vacuum. We use that almost exclusively.
Okay. And then my other quick question was, I'm always interested in the structure of how this works. And so you say you're getting trees from municipalities. Do you guys have your own cutting team? Because construction companies can go in and just bulldoze down. So how does that work for you?
Yeah. So now you're getting at the heart of the problem, right? Is that we do not have our own arborist team or tree team. What we have though is we've developed relationships over the last decade with all the top tree service companies in all the cities that we work. So they know, instead of seeing something end up getting chipped, burnt, put in a landfill, they can drop it off here. For them, there's a lot of value in that, because they're not having to pay tipping fees to dispose of the material, and they can drop it off in a 12-foot section and be on their way without having to chop it up and dispose. So we create those relationships at that level, on the private level. With the municipalities and the bigger corporate private landholders, that's really about getting way out in front of the problem and developing policy. And so one of the coolest things we have, not New England, but I'll still call it the Northeast, is later this month, we have our ribbon cutting ceremony for our project with the city of Philadelphia. It is the first of its kind public-private partnership at an organic recycling center. And so this organic recycling center for the city of Philadelphia, They would take all the green waste, all their organic waste, all these logs would get dropped off there, and they would just chip everything. Chip. Giant wood chip pile. Every year it gets on fire. It catches on fire multiple times sometimes, and they have to put this thing out. They have to deal with it. It's such a nightmare. And so we created policy, and we worked with the city of Philadelphia because they wanted to solve this problem that was a liability and turn it into an asset. So we worked with workforce development company that's really sponsoring this. We're teaching young kids with barriers to employment how to grade logs, how to cut, how to dry, how to stack, and we're creating certified new generation of sawyers with these skills that then can go back into our supply chain and get hired. And this particular project is so exciting because now we're turning that material into wood that can go back into the community. The city is just floored because they're happy as all hell that this isn't a liability. They're adding value. They're adding this wood back. And that wood ends up in our supply chain now that we can then sell to local communities. And it's like a win-win across the board. We have 10 other cities that have already expressed incredible interest to follow along on this because the model before this was broken. Same thing with private landowners. So we work with, think of the biggest tech companies on the planet that you can name. We work with all of them because they all own a ton of land and they all develop it all the time. And to have community outrage that happens about, are you cutting down these beautiful redwoods? They need to work with somebody that says, hey, we have a plan and policy in place. So if a storm happens in a city or private land like this, where this policy already exists and it wipes out all these trees, it's not like, oh God, what are we going to do to save it? It's like, no, we already have a plan in place. It gets chopped in 12-foot sections. They get stored here. It gets dropped off here, and it gets milled back into lumber that comes back onto the property. And that's the work that we have to do. And that's the stuff that takes a long time. And that's why we have a whole consulting team to do that work, to really build that for the long haul.
That's phenomenal. Congratulations with Philly. The amount of trees they have is unbelievable. That's great.
Yeah, that's coming up on the 23rd. We have that event coming up. So if anybody's in the area, I have invitation to that. So if anybody is near there, I think most people are kind of further north, but just you can reach out to me. You can email me if you want to go. I can send you an invite.
You will.
Well, I think that will look to conclude the Q&A session. We'll get into some general discussion topics now, but once again, thank Jeff for showing up with Cambium, talking about the carbon smart wood, as we look at kind of what does a circular future look like, using these streams that are typically going to waste, especially for such a beautiful at times product. Good on you.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. We appreciate the time too, as always. And if you guys have any questions, projects, whatever you want, just reach out to me anytime.
Thank you, John.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And just getting into some final items to share my screen. So wanted to share some updates. So I need to hit share. Next month, we will not be having a meeting because what we will be doing next month is being part of the embodied, you're all seeing this, right? Perfect. The Northeast Embodied Carbon Summit. This is the 5-year anniversary of the Embodied Carbon Building Summit that was held in 2019 at MIT. It'll be a 2-day summit for those who don't know, with the first day on June 20th, the Thursday being a full day, 3 different panel presentations about kind of essentially where we are, what we can do and where we need to go, looking at things like policy, materials. And the second day, which is going to be a half day, holding several workshops. Laurel and I will be holding a circularity and reuse workshop on day 2, a 90-minute program where we're really looking to take what we're doing here, but kind of make it a bit more physical, bringing people into the room and bringing in different reuse vendors, different opportunities, manufacturers to really talk with the AEC community and work out some problems to say, hey, what are the barriers you're all seeing? Can we right now solve some of them? Can we dispel some misconceptions you may have, or at least introduce you to an option that you didn't know existed? So we're really happy for that. We can share the link to that as well. I can put it in the chat. But it's through the BSA as they are our CLF's partner. So please feel free to go and register for that. In addition, wanted to say that LEAD V5 public comment period has been extended from May the 20th to May the 24th. So 1 week from tomorrow. For those of you who have not looked into it, there are several extremely relevant credits towards reuse, circularity, and embodied carbon. I'll go through them quickly here, but I would ask that you please take a look. And also, these are all LEED ID and C, just because that's what is most relevant to most of us. But these also are applicable credits in B, D, and C as well. So there's a planning for zero waste operations, really looking on how to take the design side and make sure that what's going into the project is looking to design as closely possible to zero waste. Also a credit on assessing and reducing embodied carbon. So this is looking at the embodied carbon impacts of new interior materials all the way through the project life cycle. Also wanted to denote the construction and demolition waste management credit. This one is one that is near and dear to my heart and has demolition and construction waste diversion points and requirements. It is a bit different than LEED 4 and 4.1. I think a bit to the better, but looking at, I'll zoom down here real quick, for at least 1 point, making projects site separate at least 3 materials with minimum quantities that need to be reported out, looking to target third-party verification for co-mingled facilities. So you can't just, if you want 2 points, to take it anywhere. And if you do want to take it anywhere, you have to go above and beyond to source, separate, and recycle 5 materials. And then for 3 points, really getting into the nitty-gritty, going through targeted materials, using take-back programs like carpets, ceiling tiles, gypsum wallboard. Now, while this isn't final, and I would ask all of you to give your input on it, this is the next step in really making sure that waste, especially construction waste, is handled with a bit better. Going through the rest of these, optimized building products. This is the material credit that we're all used to, but it has pretty radically changed. I'll zoom down real quick and you'll see this very, at first, confusing matrix table here. I would say if you have time to digest and look into this, this new version of LEED wants to reward materials that are either going for several different buckets. As you see up here, I think Laurel, correct me if I'm wrong, these are like the mines material kind of buckets up here. But looking at how does a product contribute to climate health, human health, and then the last one you'll see there, circular economy, with full points for reused materials, looking at both ecosystem health and circular economy. So please take a look at that. And lastly, oh my goodness, that is very pulled up. The reuse interiors and reduce embodied carbon, really looking at to give more points of, are you reusing these interior products? Are you going above and beyond? And are you kind of understanding the embodied carbon impacts of that to reduce them from the beginning? So you're not just getting a new, better product, but really limiting the need for that product altogether. So that is the lead I wanted to bring up. And then lastly, for those of you who weren't in construction, the Mass DEP today put on their C&D subcommittee meeting where they released the 2023 annual report for processing facilities in the state of Mass. I'll keep it simple. All the red you see there is the percentage from each processor that was landfilled. It is still a lot. In the discussion, though, especially with processors, it was relayed to them that much better collaboration is needed going forward. Some of them are not kind of even hitting the 15% minimum process separation rate. So what can be done going forward? And the Mass DEP is not only looking to increase enforcement, but move up from that 15% process separation rate requirement to a 20% in 2025. And then in 2027, going up to 23%. I'm trying to remember now. And then by 2030, going all the way up to 30%. So looking to, as we see in other kind of areas with embodied carbon policy and carbon disclosures, really ramp that up over time to meet net zero goals. That is also coming to Massachusetts. So I just wanted to inform the group on that, as those are extremely relevant updates, both locally and regionally, that will impact us all. With that said, any other questions? Anyone have any other comments to share? Nice.
I'm excited to take a look at that LEED V5 materials credit.
Yeah.
As well as the others. So I think there's some good upward movement happening with LEED V5. So
I will, just since you said that, I will share what Wes Sullins from USGBC has noted a couple times, which is that they also appreciate positive comments. So anywhere that you see that upward movement, feel free to note that, because they are wading through a whole slew of feedback. And
good point. People tend to be most vocal when they have something negative to say.
So, and
we all need encouragement here too.
And you can comment either on USGBC's website or also on Lead User if anybody is if anyone uses Lead User, and you can also like upvote other people's comments. So keep that in mind. And the last thing I would say about that, from hearing from some of the folks who are on the MR tag and reviewing those comments, if you are writing a longer comment, they request that you do like the too long didn't read high level summary at the very top, because all of these go into a very cumbersome like spreadsheet, and it's easier for them to navigate if you put your like key takeaway or key point in one top
and try
sentence.
to just be concise in general. Seems
Yeah.
like a
good
good goal.
Perfect. So just to reiterate, next month, no meeting. Please put the link in the chat if you can sign up and attend the Embodied Carbon Summit. Day 2 is when we're having the workshop, which, like I said, will hopefully not only take the place of this, but really bring people together. So we ask that, and leave V5 comments by next Friday, please. Because the first round is the round where stuff can really get done. When the second round of comments comes out, it's a lot harder to get things changed.
I thought it was Monday. I thought it was the 20th.
They changed that.
Oh.
Yes.
Amazing. That's great.
But I mean, the sooner the better, because
yeah.
I love procrastinating and then forgetting. So the sooner the better.
Yeah. Awesome.
With that said, I believe we can end it there. So thank you, everyone. We will be sending out meeting minutes next week, most likely at the beginning of the week. We will include Jeff's contact information and some of these website links as well. So if you have not saved them from the chat, no worries.
Thank you.
How do I sign up for the mailing list? I don't know if I'm getting the emails.
I can add you.
Okay, great.
Perfect. We'll make a note.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Everybody.
Bye.